Awesome. Okay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Sydney. I work for the Rural Development Network, and we are a nonprofit organization that are tasked with distributing the federal government's Reaching Home funding. We'll do a quick round of introductions just shortly here, but I just wanted to first take a moment to acknowledge that our organization's physical office is located in Amiskwitīs, Wisconsin, which is also known as Beaver Hills House or Edmonton. And we are located on the traditional territories of Treaty 6 and within the Métis Nation homeland, specifically the Fort Edmonton Métis District and Edmonton Whitemud Métis District. And I'd like to thank our hosts, the Nahiawa Cree, the Dene, the Niitsitapi Blackfoot, the Saulteaux, the Métis, and Nakota Sioux, and many others whose traditional lands we stand upon today. Several years ago, our organization made an intentional commitment to reconciliation. And as a non-Indigenous organization, I think it's really important to reaffirm my personal and our organization's commitment to reconciliation through our organization's initiatives. As we all know, houselessness continues to disproportionately impact Indigenous peoples and nations across Turtle Island as a result of colonization. And as I've learned from several elders, the word homelessness does not exist in Indigenous languages, which I think is incredibly powerful to think about and reflect on. Now, as a team, we aim to develop culturally appropriate tools and resources in collaboration with Indigenous peoples, support for Indigenous by Indigenous projects and solutions, and ultimately seek new and improved ways to administer the Reaching Home's federal homelessness funding in order for funding to benefit more Indigenous nations. Together, our team is committed to practicing humility as we learn and unlearn about the history and the legacy of colonization across Turtle Island. And lastly, as we continue to build and strengthen relationships with nations across Alberta and Turtle Island, we recognize that there is much more work to be done and roles that our team can play as allies. I would like to extend a sincere thank you to our partners, as well as Indigenous advisors over the past year, including Emile Neufeld, Sandy Boucher, Katie Rabbit Young Pine, Mary Stacy, Derek Bruno, his dad, Elder Victor, who's here with us today, and his team, who have walked alongside our organization and have not only deeply impacted my personal reconciliation journey, but our organization's reconciliation journey and approach to working with Indigenous communities. So with that being said, before we tell you a little bit more about our organization, I did want to pass things over to Derek and his dad, Elder Victor, to open us in prayer.
Yeah, thank you for that. Welcome everybody. Danse Tatumskat no Gakio. It's a real pleasure to have you guys here. Obviously, we're going to be talking about something that's really, really important to me. It's always been, as my father says, the home fires of our communities. How do we find ways to strengthen that? So it's really great that you're here to seek some of that information. As we do in all of our events and various sessions, starting in a good way is important to us. So I've given some tobacco to my father, Elder Victor Bruno, who's from the Samson Cree Nation, to start us off in a good way. So, Dad, I'll hand it off to you.
Niigaan kakkiu tatamskat na mina kakkiu umottakan tohtahkik. Jaak pitsu haisak yktoa heisnistä. Maaga kavisavimguna tavina. I'd say good morning to each and everyone and ask a blessing, a very special blessing this morning, that today will be a little better in all our ways, in what we do, what our endeavors are, what our plans are. Always ask that we do things a little better than we did yesterday, an extra blessing that I ask for. So with that, pray with me, excuse me, in your hearts and your minds. We also pray for the future. So our young people will have a good future. Enjoy our environment as we enjoy it today. Hai maitan mamo yohtai ma kiksewatsin. Ksoksin gahkeugi või mõned magigoek prakastini. Aksemaga anotso magap mis pitskik sepa aktau magap nito tamatan. issuq ep misun tamatane miosik kikseoatsun tape asaskin mawia kispepega kio mutta tat muassa kami pia kakun tohta kikovi yksi ep misun tamataan maamu jo taima kseoatsin ep maip kasmi kakis mutta tatan ep mas muan kikosis Jesus yksi että takiot isuts kotemia so ihte mona tänään melko viive taas taksikin patjuja Notska giska jahkasta maunan aivaagi siis koista tuttamaa kakkivis pepeua o teniga ma prema to asumsna mussimna ossake gatsuskoga mine kapino usko ossak gatsuskoga nihtaut kakkiot minu teniga näeb tuo usmi oaja tat miehka piku maski sinna kakkiokset mis se imina taut septa gaga simus so that you'll understand some of the prayers. O great Spirit, descend upon us, pervade our imagination, suggest our decisions, order our doings. Be with us in our speech and in our silence, in our haste and in our leisure, in company and in solitude, and in the freshness of the morning, and in the weariness of the evening. Grant that each and every one of us will humbly rejoice thy mysterious companionship within each and every one of us. Hi, hi. May the Great Spirit bless all your home fires. Your home fires are your family circle of love. That is your home fire. Cherish it. Give thanks for the Great Spirit's blessings. Hi, hi, and have a great day.
Thanks, Dad. Over to you, Sydney.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elder Victor, for starting us off in such a great way. And the prayer was so beautiful. And I think what's so incredibly powerful about prayer is just how it can transcend, language. And yeah, certainly beautiful listening to you this morning, and really grateful for you coming and yeah, like I said, starting us off in a good way. So thank you, Elder Victor. And yeah, thanks, Derek, for inviting your dad to come and start us off. And one thing I also wanted to just note is our team, as we've begun working with Derek and his dad and Jill and Kiara across the SevGen team, we've had the pleasure of actually going to Samson Cree Nation, attending a ceremony with Derek's dad to kick the relationship that we were starting with SevGen off in a really great way. We had the opportunity to also attend the powwow and just celebrate the amazing, rich culture that exists across so many communities. And so definitely encourage folks, if you have the opportunity to attend some, local Indigenous community cultural events to do so. Certainly was, yeah, a highlight for our team, and just, yeah, really, really feeling very, very grateful to have opportunities like this in this work. And I think we can acknowledge, the challenges, and especially in the context of when it comes to funding, where many nations are in a housing crisis, but I think it's also been really important for our team to really celebrate the resilience of many Indigenous communities, as well as the culture that continues on. So with that being said, just wanted to also start off with a quick round of introductions so you know who's on the call from our team. I've already introduced myself. I'm going to pass it over to Bryn, and then we can introduce the folks from SevGen who are also on the call.
Thanks, Sydney. Good morning, everybody. My name's Bryn. I am the program coordinator here at the Rural Development Network for the Reaching Home program. It's really lovely to meet everybody today. I'm the person that's typically on the other end of your emails if you are ever contacting, asking about application information, or if you are eventually a successful project. I am one of the main people that you will be connecting with. It's really great to see everyone though today, and yeah, welcome. I can pass it over to Derek first, I guess, then to introduce himself.
Sure. Derek Bruno Nasigasun from the Samson Cree Nation, managing partner of SevGen Consulting. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. Jill, I'll throw it to you.
Thanks, Derek. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jill. I have the privilege of working with Derek and with RDN for this project. So it's great to see you this morning, and thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. And because we do have a small group with us, I'm just wondering if folks, we have a few of you here. Did you want to do introductions? Only if you're comfortable, but I thought it just might be nice to know who else is on the other end of the call. I can see Eileen on my screen if you wanted to go first. Oh, and you're just on mute.
There we go. Yeah, I'm Eileen. We're from Wainwright. I am the treasurer with the Armor of Light Recovery Society.
Awesome. Great to see you again.
Good to see you too.
And then I know we have Lloydminster Vermilion LVE, I believe, on the call. And I'm sorry, I don't know who is
It's
there.
Tigra.
It's Tigra. Sorry, Tigra.
Hey, my name's Tigra Lee. I'm co-founder of Lloydminster and Vermilion for Equity.
Awesome. And I apologize, Tigrely, for my poor eyesight this morning. Good to see you. And then Candace, I'm not sure if if you wanted to do introductions, but I thought I would just see if you wanted to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm the chairperson for our Clearwater Regional Housing Foundation.
Good to see you. All familiar faces. So
Yeah, good to see you too.
awesome. Usually, Candace, we run into each other at CAH, but I know this year, unfortunately, it just funding, right?
Yeah,
But hopefully
funding.
in future.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. And yeah, like I said, because it was such a small group, I would hate to not know who's on the other end of the call, and certainly appreciate your time today. To give you a quick overview, so this session this morning is really focused on the Indigenous application guide and process that our team has created specifically to reduce barriers for First Nations, Métis communities and settlements in applying for and accessing Reaching Home funding in Alberta. Bryn's going to give an overview of the application guide really shortly, but just wanted to, provide a little bit of context around why we started the Indigenous guide and why it's incredibly important for our team. So one thing we do like to acknowledge and just be super transparent about is unfortunately we get very limited funding in comparison to the need that exists because we receive funding from the federal government through the Reaching Home program, and then we distribute it out to rural, remote First Nations, Métis settlements and communities. And so it's just a very vast, geography in Alberta. And obviously, as I mentioned, our country and many communities are facing housing crises, many other crises, compounding, the challenges. And ultimately, we get only $2.4 million roughly per year to allocate out to communities. Obviously, it's not going to be able to support every community that applies for this funding. In the past, we've received requests for over 75 applications and requests totaling $22 million. And we do only have usually around, 2.4 million per year, 4.8 if you're looking at the 2 years that we're welcoming communities to apply for funding for. But just like to be transparent about that. However, if we're not able to fund your project and community, we're certainly always willing to connect with folks to talk about your application, to talk about other funding that may be available to support your community. The federal government has been entering into what they call distinction-based funding agreements with many First Nations MAT organizations, specifically in Alberta. And if you don't already have relationships with some of these folks, we'd love to put you in contact with the right person who might be or who would be able to better support and talk about funding, because how it's distributed across some of these organizations just works a little bit differently. So just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that. And we are always advocating for more funding for rural, remote, and Indigenous communities in Alberta, specifically through the federal government as well as provincial. But I would say because this is federal funding, that's typically where some of our advocacy work takes place. And we certainly, as a non-Indigenous organization, we have developed a application process that hopefully is, more culturally appropriate. And it's been informed by Indigenous partners and projects that we've worked with over the years who have said, hey, like we don't have the capacity to write an onerous application, or that's not our strength. Our strength is, oral storytelling and sharing about the work and the projects that we are doing in the communities. So that's why our application process for Indigenous communities specifically is focused on, or we just ask, communities to submit a letter of intent. And then we ask communities, or our board, I should say, we have a regional advisory board that oversees all funding decisions regarding this funding. And so they, alongside us, will reach out to a number of Indigenous applicants who apply for this funding, and then we'll proceed with oral interviews. And I don't love the word interview, really, it's a conversation around your project. And that's where we can dive into some more of those details that maybe that weren't captured in the letter of intent or we didn't ask specifically about. So that's a little bit about the process. Again, Bryn's going to go over everything. So maybe now is the best time to pass things over to her, although there's one more important thing, that I forgot to mention that is incredibly important. And what I can say in my experience, I've worked with this organization over the last 5 years, and I have really seen an intentional commitment by our board who makes these funding decisions to prioritize Indigenous applications. With that being said, this year the board had a conversation and really wanted to publicly announce and make sure that folks knew we were going to be prioritizing Indigenous organizations and Indigenous communities, as well as Indigenous serving organizations, because we also recognize this is rural remote funding and a number of communities also serve primarily Indigenous peoples. So that was a really important commitment that our board made, really proud of the board, and certainly in agreement with our organization, certainly is in agreement with that priority, but just wanted to share that with folks as well, as that's something that's been new if you've been familiar and have applied for this funding in previous years. So with that being said, I'll now pass things over to Bryn, who's going to take some time and go through the Indigenous application guide. And because there's only a few of you, I would say definitely feel free to raise your hand at any point or put your questions in the chat. I'll be helping monitor while Bryn goes through, but I think it can be a more interactive discussion because of the size of the group.
Thank you so much, Sydney. It's great to see everybody this morning. So yeah, like Sydney mentioned, we're going to go through the application guide to get started. Just so everyone is aware, you can find our application guide just on our website. So when you go into the Reaching Home section for the proposals and everything, we will have this information in there, so you're able to download it and also review it for yourself later if need be. But yeah. So we created this new Indigenous application guide this year, actually, on the recommendation of our friends at SevGen. They had let us know that it was going to be a better process, essentially, for making sure we share the differences with the Indigenous application, as it is a little bit different from the general or current project application. But yeah, I'm going to go through this right now, but if anyone has any questions, by all means, definitely raise your hands, hop on in, and will do my best to answer them as they come. But yeah, so as you can see, when you first open up the guide, you're going to see an overview of the Reaching Home call for proposal, a little bit about who RDN is, and then who is eligible. Oh, sorry, I lied. When you open up our guide, you are going to see a table of contents to start. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that we were halfway scrolled down here. But yeah, so the table of contents is really good if you're looking to get anywhere in the guide specifically. You can definitely take a peek there, and it should make it a little bit easier to review the whole guide for yourselves. Then to start off, we have a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our guide. And then we get into the key information section. This is also a new addition to both our general and our Indigenous application guide. So this just kind of has all of the key dates and big information to take away from the guide if we don't have time to review everything in detail the way we want to. This is a very good reference point. So just to go through everything so everyone is aware, if you are looking to apply, you can definitely click on the link here through the guide. You can also access it on our website to get there. It is a Google form, so it will take you there, and you will be asked to log in using a Gmail account. Don't worry if you don't have, if your work email isn't essentially a Gmail, you can use any Gmail, your personal or anything like that, to log in to use the account. However, when you get into the application, we will ask you for the work email and how you would like to be contacted. So unless you put the physical Gmail in the application form, just so you guys are aware, we won't contact you using that. I understand some groups just naturally have Gmail accounts, and that's great if that works for you. But if you are somebody who doesn't, that is just kind of a workaround there. Next up, so the Indigenous letter of intent. Obviously, Sydney had talked a little bit about this. So it is just a bit of a different way of applying. So essentially, instead of going through and answering all of the typical questions that you would on the general or the current application, we have you guys include most of your information just in a letter of intent. It gives us a brief understanding of what the concept of the project is. And then based off of that, we will connect with you later, like Sydney mentioned, for interviews and just to get a bit more information and to discuss what your project really is, so we can get into the nitty gritty and really understand what it is that you are applying for and looking for funding. Just so everybody is aware, really key date, December 8th at 1 p.m. So I know it's a little bit different. So December 8th, that's next Monday. So we are just under a week away now from applications being due. They are due at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I just want to really make sure that I flag that. I know typically things are due at the end of the day. They're due on Fridays. But it is in fact Monday at 1 p.m. that the applications are due. So please make sure that you get those in before then. Definitely recommend trying to submit a little bit before then, just in case you do run into any issues with the form or have questions. We don't want anyone to be too under the gun there, but yeah, just wanted to stress that. And another update this year is that we have a maximum project funding request. So if anyone here has applied for previous years for the Reaching Home funding through the Rural Development Network, you guys would know that typically the call had been open and you could ask for as much funding as you want. After speaking with our board members this year and just kind of reviewing the way the process has gone in the past, we found that imposing this maximum funding of $100,000 a year or $200,000 if you're applying for a 2-year project, we're hoping will just work a little bit better. In previous years, when projects were able to apply for as much funding as they wanted, it led to a lot of projects having to get budgets trimmed. And then essentially, when you ask for a $300,000 project and you get funded for a $60,000 project, by the time you've done all the trimming in that, obviously the project isn't really the same as what you originally applied for. So we're just hoping by putting it at this $100,000 a year mark, it's going to prevent too much trimming from having to happen and people still kind of being able to keep the true premise of their project. With that said, the $100,000 a year came upon basically based off historical maximums that we have typically funded for. So on average, $100,000 a year was the most that we typically were giving projects. There was maybe a couple outliers in there over the past few years, but $100,000 is pretty much the typical maximum. So we're just hoping based off of that, that it will keep things a bit more streamlined and easy when projects are applying. With that said, just because we're saying that there is a maximum of $100,000 a year, we do want to make sure that everybody knows that if you are successful, you aren't guaranteed at receiving this $100,000 a year mark. You also aren't penalized if you don't need $100,000 a year. If you're just looking to support the wages of one person and it works out to $60,000 or anything, that's perfectly fine too. So I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of on the same page there. But yeah, with the $100,000 a year, even if we are looking at trimming budgets, we're just hoping that it will still keep things a bit more similar without having to really change the whole premise of what you guys are looking to apply for. But yeah, next up, the total available funding. Sydney had touched on this. So it is $4.8 million from 2026 to 2028, working out to about $2.4 million a year in funding that we'll be able to divvy out amongst the different projects. Project types, you guys are able to apply for either operational or capital funding. With this funding, you are only eligible to apply for one or the other. So it should either be a capital project or it should be an operational project. With the capital project comes a sustainability plan. So if you have been a previous Reaching Home project and you're looking to apply for another project, it is just part of the process essentially that you aren't able to apply for operational funding to continue on your capital funding because of the sustainability requirement. We can talk about that a little bit later though, with the capital projects and sustainability requirements, but just so everybody's aware with that. The earliest project start date is going to be April 1st, 2026. So unfortunately with this funding, no retroactive payments will be able to occur. So if your project started on January 1st, 2026, we won't be able to apply any funding until April 1st, 2026. So no activities that happen before April 1st, 2026 will be eligible for this funding, just so everybody is aware. The latest project completion date is March 31st, 2028. So same thing, no activities that occur after March 31st, 2028 will be eligible for this funding. So somewhere between April 1st, 2026 and March 31st, 2028 is when all projects will have to have started and completed. For eligible applicants, anyone is eligible to apply for the rural and remote stream of reaching home funding outside of the 7 major cities. So just so everybody is aware, the 7 major cities are Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, Medicine Hat, and Fort McMurray. So rural, remote, First Nations, Métis settlements, Métis communities are all eligible for the funding, as well as on-reserve projects are also eligible for this funding. Sydney had also mentioned, obviously, the priority that our regional advisory board had put out this year, and that is just that they are looking specifically for projects that are Indigenous led and or Indigenous serving. For eligible activities, the biggest piece that comes up with this is that any activities for the Reaching Home funding must be serving individuals or families who are either experiencing houselessness or at imminent risk of houselessness. So Reaching Home funding, unfortunately, isn't a program just for low-income individuals. We do need to make sure that we are linking all of our activities to houselessness, essentially, and people who are either currently experiencing it or at imminent risk of experiencing it, just so everybody is aware. For the Indigenous application information sessions, obviously you guys are in the final session for that, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. So today is the last information session for this cycle of funding for Indigenous applications, essentially. We will also be having a general information session this afternoon, and that will be the final general information session that we are also hosting for this cycle of funding. So just so everybody is aware. You can also see here that we have our email, so the rhapplications@ruraldevelopment.ca. If you do have any questions regarding your application, if you are experiencing any difficulties while you are completing our form, we just ask that you reach out to us using that rhapplications@ruraldevelopment.ca. I'm the person who's largely on the other end of that, so it should be me connecting with you. But if you guys do have any questions, definitely put them through there. We do have some other eyes that are also in there, so it just kind of filters it out from using any other emails, and you're most likely to get the best response if you connect with that email. So just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Finally, for funding decisions, so there will be oral interviews, as Sydney was mentioning, that are going to be taking place in January. So we will connect with selected projects essentially for those interviews in January, and we will set those up. Decisions will then be made by our regional advisory board following these interviews, and we expect that successful applicants will be notified in early February 2026. So yeah, so that's kind of all of the really key information that we have. I'll just kind of briefly go through the rest of the guide. So the overview of the Reaching Home call for proposals, I believe we've probably covered enough of that and who RDN is. We discussed who is eligible. Let's see. Okay, so activities that are eligible. So priority will be given to projects that address a demonstrated need. So that's a really big piece of the application for sure. Clearly outlining capacity to deliver the identified project activities. With Reaching Home, unfortunately, the reporting is quite onerous. It is a reimbursement funding stream in opposed to a typical grant. So there is a little bit more legwork that's required from projects when it comes to the reporting piece. So we do always like to make sure that we are appropriately assessing projects just to make sure that they have the capacity in order to both complete their required project, but also to complete the reporting that goes along with that. With that said, everyone here at the Rural Development Network is very good with doing our best to work with projects and building capacity for our projects. So if this is an issue, that's something that we definitely can work through, but we do always like to stress that just that there is a large reporting requirement essentially with the funding. For eligible activities and priorities, we also want to make sure that we're demonstrating innovative approaches to ending homelessness and strong partnerships. So any partnerships in the community, how you guys are working with other entities, that's another great thing to make sure you're mentioning. Obviously, developing responses to Indigenous houselessness, which could include culturally appropriate mental health supports. And I just heard a ding. Is there a question? Oh,
Sorry, Bryn, just I think Kiara just got admitted, so I just let
Sorry,
her in. Yeah, I know it is I wish we could turn off the sounds because I know it's like, oh, someone raised their hand.
squirrel. Sorry, guys. I will continue on though. But yeah. So then could also include developing a coordinated community response to addressing the spectrum of homelessness, such as a task force, and then identifying opportunities for integration of services and supports. There's a lot more information too on the next page, which you are also more than welcome to review, but just in the sake of time, I'm not going to go through absolutely everything here. Response to emergency situations, though, that is a big one. So I do want to also just flag that. But yeah, let's continue on. So examples of previous projects. So just in case you guys are wondering what exactly we can apply for or what's been funded in the past, some examples include transition beds for people with addictions waiting to get into inpatient treatment. We've also supported youth outreach and community navigators, housing support workers, all to assist folks who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing houselessness to access housing or other support services. So just kind of that same piece where I mentioned earlier about making sure that the people that we are funding are either experiencing or at risk of experiencing houselessness. Just want to really stress that. Shelter pods have also been a type of project that we've done in the past. So this included the purchasing and retrofitting of trailers to provide emergency shelter. We've also done operational costs associated with temporary emergency MAP programs and shelters. We've done site preparation and renovation for Indigenous-led supportive housing projects, land for second stage transitional shelters, and data collection and community action plans. So definitely lots of different stuff. If there's something that you guys were thinking about that you wanted to apply for that isn't on this list, just please know it's not exhaustive. This is just kind of to get the juices flowing. And if you're kind of curious on what it is that Reaching Home can fund, truly the list is quite long and there are a lot of things. We're always open to new ideas. So that's something that, like I said, if you're not 100% sure, reach out to that RH applications email and Sydney and myself are definitely happy to connect with you there. Or if you have any ideas that you'd like to share with the group and discuss, we can also probably make time for that to go over it today as well. So yeah. Next thing, just as important as the things that are eligible are the things that are not eligible. So I just want to touch on these kind of briefly. So providing landlords with incentives or bonuses to rent to people who are exiting homelessness is unfortunately not something that is eligible through Reaching Home. In order to cover housing setup costs before other funding sources have been exhausted is not allowed. So essentially, Reaching Home should be used as the last base for funding. It shouldn't be used as the first response. We should be exhausting all other pre-existing options out there essentially when it comes to using the funding. So if there's no other option that's eligible in order to cover somebody's housing or whatever the situation is here, that's when Reaching Home should be coming in. Rent-to-own programs are also unfortunately not allowed. Along with that, I should mention that nothing with mortgage payments are allowed. Providing short-term rental assistance to individuals or families who are already receiving provincial, territorial, or municipal social assistance or rental assistance programs for the same purpose are not allowed. So essentially just no double dipping is what that would be saying there. Providing long-term rental assistance is also not eligible through Reaching Home. Down payments are also not allowed. And then the creation of a rent bank, essentially, to provide loans. So you aren't able to give out the money and then request it back and kind of do that sort of system is unfortunately not allowed either. The list is longer. So like I said, once again, you guys are more than welcome to open up the application guide and just kind of review it for yourself and make sure that there's nothing that you guys were looking for that does fall in these categories. But yeah. Continue on down there. International travel costs also aren't eligible. Purchase of alcoholic beverages, job wages for individuals participating in an education training or pre-employment program too. Just want to flag all of those, but like I said, quite a few more in there, just in the interest of time, though I'm not going to read you the entire guide. If you do want to find out more information also about the Reaching Home program, definitely recommend checking out the Reaching Home directives. It is a little bit of a longer, drier read, so it's not something that's super easy. I'm not going to lie about that one, but definitely worth referencing if you do have questions. Also, like I mentioned, Sydney and myself are both really great resources to make sure that if you are unsure if something is eligible, definitely reach out to us and we're more than happy to help you guys with all of that. So what are the reporting requirements for this funding? So as I mentioned earlier, the reporting is a little bit more extensive for Reaching Home. So I just want to make sure that we do touch on this. As mentioned, it is a reimbursement program. So essentially that means that we're not giving you guys the money. right up front when you start the project. Typically, the way that it would work would be at the end of every quarter or every month, you would submit your expenses to us. We would review them, make sure everything is eligible and that all the necessary backup is there for the items that you are claiming for. So that would be any receipts, payroll, leases, things like that. Essentially, we would go through, make sure that we have all of the necessary documents. When everything looks okay, we would request an invoice from you for whatever that total was for either the month or the quarter, however it is that you decided that you wanted to do the payment essentially. So after we reviewed it and everything looks good, we'd request an invoice and then we would pay that invoice to you. So you would typically be the person that is fronting the upfront cost, and then we would be paying you back after everything has been confirmed that it is eligible through Reaching Home. Now, that's not to say that this is the only way that we can do things. For certain projects, we can also offer advances. So especially when we look at capital projects, when a lot of the time they need a lot of money up front, in those cases, we would just be requesting quotes and making sure that we have some backup, that it makes sense as to what we are prepaying a project essentially for that. So that is another way forward. So it's not to say that we can't do things like that, but it is something that just needs to kind of be communicated with us so we are all on the same page and making sure that the project can move forward. If you're not doing a capital project, we do still offer advances as well. So same thing. It's just kind of a case of reaching out to us and we can chat and figure out what works best. Typically, if it's something more like operational funding, so maybe you're requesting wages in your application, just because that's an easy example, I'll use it. We might prepay for 2 or 3 months worth of wages. So you're able to pay the worker to do the work. And then at the end of that month, we'll review all the documents, make sure that everything was good, and then we can issue another advance for the next couple months to pay for the funding. So yeah, if funding is an issue or cash flow, definitely by all means reach out and let us know, but that isn't the typical way forward. So that is just something that needs to be discussed after you've been successfully approved essentially for the funding. Sydney, I'm not sure if you want to mention anything else on that front.
I don't think so. I think you covered it all. But yeah, just know there's certainly flexibility there, and as you mentioned. So yeah, no, I think you got it.
Perfect. And then just one other piece, I guess, that's important to mention when it comes to the reporting is annual data and quarterly project specific data. So on top of obviously the financial reconciliation and all of that that needs to occur, we also do request that projects collect certain data. So we have a quarterly data spreadsheet. It's not too hard to fill out. It's pretty straightforward for that, but there are just a few data points that, depending on what your project is doing, you need to track. For annual data, there is different stuff. So the annual data is something that's done specifically through the federal government. So with that, it doesn't track everything that you're doing by any means, but there are just some specific categories that we need to make sure that you guys are tracking. There is an Excel spreadsheet that goes along with it. It's a little bit confusing, but we do training on it and everything, and we will definitely get you guys up to speed if you are successful in receiving the funding, sorry. But yeah, just wanted to also just make note that there is those other requirements essentially with the funding. There also is an activity report that we request that projects complete. With that said, for Indigenous projects, we have the option to complete an oral activity report. So this was an option that came about a few years ago, where essentially we decided that this was just a more culturally appropriate way to do reporting with our Indigenous projects. It's not something that you have to do. If you want to complete a written report and that's how you feel comfortable, that's perfectly fine. But the oral activity report is something that we offer. So essentially it's just meeting with Sydney or myself, for the both of us. You let us know what's kind of been going on for the last quarter. We have a chat and then we're able to write the report and make all of the notes for you instead of having you complete it yourself. It's completely up to the project if that's something that you guys would like to partake in or not partake in, but it is a flexibility that we do offer just in the spirit of reconciliation. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that too, which once again, when I talk about that, we try to make things as easy on you guys. We say that the reporting is onerous, but we do want to make it as easy on you. That is one of the flexibilities that we offer in hopes of doing that. So yeah. We already talked about how much funding communities can apply for, so I don't think we need to go through that again unless anyone has any questions with that. We also mentioned how communities can apply, so obviously through the Google form, and we will go through that a little bit later. We do have the letter of intent, obviously, that you guys are all eligible to apply for. So you still need to use the Google form when it comes to submitting your letter of intent, just so everybody is aware. Essentially, it asks you a few questions that are just fairly general on the application, just to get background information on who the community is, who our contact information would be when it comes to connecting with you guys. And then at the very end of it, there's an option where basically you select that you are applying through the Indigenous application stream, and then it'll take you to specific questions that are linked to that. And one of the options underneath that stream is going to be uploading your letter of intent. So with the letter of intent, we just really want to get the community story. We want to hear what community, or we want to learn about your community, and we want to know what houselessness looks like in your community. We understand that this is also a tough question to answer, just in the respect that we know with a lot of Indigenous communities, obviously it is very obvious when you are in your guys' neighborhood that it's a problem, right? And we understand that. We know that it can feel almost unnecessary to explain to us that this is something that's going on. So we do recognize that. It's just unfortunately, as part of the application, we do need to have a little bit of context with it. So we apologize for the fact that you have to explain that this is something that's going on in your guys' communities. However, we do just want you to know that we do appreciate you sharing these stories, and we understand that they can be difficult to share. And it is important for us just when it comes to reviewing the applications and just being able to see and get context for ourselves, because we aren't somebody that's necessarily in your community every day. So we might not have experienced the same things that you guys have experienced. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that quickly. We also just want to have a little bit of the project overview. So just kind of knowing when your project is planning to start and when it's planning to end, and briefly what your project is all about, essentially. So how will the funding support community members who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness, and what services and supports are you guys wanting to provide? So we want to have that information in the letter of intent. Like I mentioned, when it's going to start and when it's going to end, just so we have some understanding there. And then we just need to make sure that we have it signed by whoever the appropriate signing authority is in your community. And then we'll need a budget. So with the budget, we do have a template on our website for, essentially, if you're successful, it's a template that you will need to use to submit the budget if you're successful. However, for the application, you guys don't need to use the budget template if you don't want to. So if you guys have a different budget that you guys would rather use or are more comfortable using when it comes to applying, you are more than welcome to use your own internal template. And that is just another, offering, essentially, that we're strictly doing just for our Indigenous application stream. So all the general and current projects, unfortunately, do have to use the regular budget when it comes to applying. But yeah. For Indigenous capital projects also, so obviously there will be additional interviews and phone calls, and we will need to be able to develop a sustainability plan. With that said, the sustainability plan does not need to be submitted with the application. So with the general application, typically you would have to submit the capital sustainability checklist and everything. However, for Indigenous projects, it's not something that we require to be completed until we have deemed that you guys are successful in receiving the funding, essentially. However, there is the capital project application guidelines and sustainability checklist that you are able to review. And I'm not sure, Sydney, if you were planning on going through that one a little bit later too, I believe, right?
Yes, absolutely. We can go through it really high level. And for the folks on the call too, I can ask if they're planning on submitting a capital project application, because that will just determine then how much detail I end up going into.
Perfect. And then yeah, obviously where communities can learn more, we don't need to go through the information sessions again. Let's see, additional resources. So yeah, so we also, at the bottom of our application guide, if you guys are looking for any additional resources, we have that budget template that I was talking about. There also is a completed budget example, and then the capital project application guidelines and sustainability checklist that I was just mentioning with Sydney. And then when you get to the very end, you can also see in Appendix A that basically we have all of the application questions that are all laid out at the very end of the application. I will go through it with you guys in the actual Google form just to make it a little bit simpler. But just so everybody is aware, we do have all of the questions in this Appendix A at the very end of our guide. The reason I say that is just because it's easier for projects with the Google form, I would say, to complete all of the answers before they're in the Google form instead of working through the Google form and filling it out and filling it out. I would personally recommend filling it into a Word document or something else first and then just copying and paste it. You just never know when it comes to technical issues or anything. I would never want something to get lost with the Google form. It should auto save for you in the Google form. I should also state that. But you just never know. Technology is its own beast, and I'm not somebody that's overly savvy in that. So I just always like to pick the safest route available. And like I said, I think that that's just filling it in a Word document or something before and then copying and pasting everything over. I also recommend putting it into the Word document because if there are issues when it comes to submitting the application, and if you get to the end and it's not letting you submit or there's problems, you can always email us your answers then in the Word document, and we can do our best to input everything and take care of it on our end that way. The other piece that I want to mention with putting it into a Word document is with Google Form, we've come into the issue where there is a 32,000 character response limit. For Indigenous projects, because we have the letter of intent, I don't think this is something that most projects will run into, but I just want to make sure that I flag it right now so people are aware. If you are putting it into a Word document, you can always do character counts to make sure that you are within that 32,000 letter response, essentially. So 32,000 characters, just so people are aware that it's going to include spaces, it's going to include a comma, it includes each individual letter to get you to that 32,000 mark. Obviously, because you upload the letter of intent, the actual writing in the letter of intent, that doesn't count toward the total character limit. I hope that makes sense. If anyone has any questions about that, definitely let me know. But that is just one of the big caveats of the Google form. So I really wanted to make sure that everybody here today was aware that that is an issue that has come up. Yes, so as you can see, everything is down here and you can review it and put it into your own document from there. I believe that's everything for the application guide though. Sydney, did you want me to go through the budget template next? I apologize. I don't have my list right in front of me.
That's okay. Yeah, why don't you go through the budget template next? Then I can give an overview of the capital project and sustainability plan. But just before you do that, just one other thing to note about the Google form, because yeah, the last thing we want is for this to be a barrier. And we heard at our last information session from some folks that it could pose a barrier just if you're not familiar, if you don't have an email, or people not feeling comfortable using their personal email to submit the application via the Google form. And so please know you absolutely can submit an application through the rhapplications at ruraldevelopment.ca email. That email you'll find many times mentioned throughout the guide, but just wanted to acknowledge that if there are any barriers or limitations with using this Google form, aside from even like the tech issues, definitely feel free to just send us the application, the letter of intent, and your budget via email. And we'll make sure that we confirm receipt. Or sorry, we confirm that we've received it once it's sent. So just wanted to throw that out there for folks.
Thanks, Sydney. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to review is that budget template that I was talking about previously. So like I said, it's not something that you necessarily have to use right away. However, if you are successful, it is something that we will ask that you do complete just so we are able to track everyone's budgets essentially in the same way. With that said, if it makes it easier than just to use the template right away, definitely do that. We have created a budget template example actually that is on our website. So you guys are able to review this there as well, just to make things easier. Sorry, I'm just gonna zoom in. So this is obviously a PDF version that's filled in. I will show you guys the Excel version as well in just a second, but I feel like for the sake of explanation, it's probably easier just to look at one that's completed so we can kind of review it together. But yeah. So for this, if you are a current Reaching Home project, you're going to notice that this template looks a little bit different. We did make a few updates to it this year. We're hoping it actually makes it easier, but we also understand that obviously it's a new template. And so with that, there's always a learning curve, and we do apologize for the changes there and making things different for projects. But yeah, when it comes to filling it out, basically you're going to put the name of the organization. Obviously in the example, we have the municipality of ABC. But yeah. For expenditures, so we have it broken down into different categories. So essentially there's staff wages, there are project costs, there are administration costs, and then there are capital expenses, and then other funding sources. So the way we're going to break things down when it comes to filling it in is putting it into each of these categories. I have another sheet that I can show you on the Excel in a second, just kind of to explain where things go, or to help you guys understand where things are going to go into which category, but it is pretty self-explanatory. So with that said, for the staff wages, the examples we have here, so these are two different options for how a project might fill it in. The first would be for a housing coordinator part-time at 0.5. Under the description, full-time, part-time contract section, the description is the housing coordinator will be responsible for the overall project delivery, project scope, and ensuring deadlines are met. The year one salary is $26,000 plus perks and benefits of $5,000 to give us a $31,000 first year cost. And then for year two, we are expecting a 2% increase to $26,780 a year plus the perks and benefits of $5,000 to make it a total of $31,780. So that kind of explains where the number goes. So instead of just putting that you guys have a housing coordinator and that it's going to be $31,000 a year and then $31,780 the next year, this description here just kind of gives us a little bit of context so we know how many hours the person is looking to work, what type of work it is that they are doing. Obviously, all organizations have different position names and titles and stuff. So we just like a little bit of context in there. We don't need a ton of detail, but just enough to kind of make it make sense for us so we understand what it is that the person is doing. I like to bring up this example just because it shows that there is going to be an increase in the next year. So that's something that obviously within your own organization, some places have guaranteed wage increases. And if that is something that you have, I always like to recommend flagging that just so that way you don't end up having a slight shortfall in the next year if you were supposed to have a 2 or 3% increase in the wages. So yeah. So that brings it to $62,780, obviously, over the 2 years of funding. The other option for the way that you could fill in staff wages would be for the housing case manager or navigator. So the explanation here is just the housing case manager year one. So one time at part-time, $31 an hour at 18 hours a week for 52 weeks a year brings us to $29,016. And then in year two, same thing where I talk about the wage increase. There's a 3% increase, bringing the total to $31.93 an hour for $33,207.20. So as you can see, we have the increases obviously between these 2 years as well. Still gives us similar content. It kind of explains just where that number comes from. So it's really just giving a little bit of context to what the number is that you're asking for. So we're able to have kind of some metrics behind it, just so you guys are aware. But yeah, that's how the staff wages category works. You can use either type of example. I feel like having the example is nice because you can just kind of plug in your own information and it doesn't make it too onerous, hopefully, for everybody when it comes to completing that. The next category is the project costs, obviously. So this is the big one. We have lots of different items in here. I won't go through all of them just for the sake of time here. But the one example that we can go through the damage deposit. So the expense type you put in here and it's damage deposits that you guys are looking to assist with. The description for this would be to support people experiencing homelessness with moving into safe and secure housing. The plan is to help 6 individuals or families at $1,000 a month. So then in year one, you're looking to budget $6,000. And then in year two, you're also looking to budget $6,000. It doesn't necessarily need to be those exact numbers or anything like that. It's just kind of giving context once again to the $6,000. When the rubber hits the road and your project is actually happening, maybe that 6 individuals is actually 7 individuals at $700 or something, and there's a slight change, but it just kind of gives us an idea of where you think that money is going to go. It doesn't necessarily need to be super hard and fast, and you have to find somebody for $1,000 in order to help them or anything like that. So don't get too hung up on it, but just what you guys deem to be what you think essentially is going to happen, if that makes sense. Projects also sometimes, so when it comes to things like damage deposits or rental arrears, sometimes there's internal decisions made where basically you're only able to help an individual or family up to $1,000 or $1,500 or anything like that. So that would also be obviously a good thing to include in there. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's not too confusing for anyone, but if anyone has questions on how that works, please by all means let me know. The next cost is, or the next category though, is the admin. So this is allowed to be up to 15% of your total budget for the year. So it's not 15% on top of what you're requesting. It would be in that $100,000. So if you were doing the $100,000 budget, you would be able to request $15,000, obviously, in admin expenses, or up to $15,000 in admin expenses. It's not required to request any admin in your budget, but if that is something you do want to do, that is the maximum. In this example here, we have office rent. So we put office rent at 25%. So they are renting for the Reaching Home office space is $200 a month. And then there's just a note that in kind, there's actually $800 a month that is going to that. Later on, when I finish the example, you'll be able to see that there's an in kind section where it kind of breaks down that as well. So that's just showing that Reaching Home isn't actually paying for the entire office cost here. We're only paying for that 25% of the total. This brings it though to $2,400 a month for both year 1 and year 2. Obviously, if you think that there's going to be a rent increase, also a good thing to maybe denote in here as well if you needed to. Next up, we have capital expenses. So a capital expense is anything that costs over $1,000. So if you have any items that you guys are looking to submit for that are going to be over $1,000, we recommend that you put them in this section. For example, that could be a laptop. So in this example, we put that you're purchasing 2 computers for clients to use to apply for income assistance or jobs, etc. And it brings it to $3,000 that you guys are applying for in year 1. Obviously, the other detail you could have mentioned in the description is that each computer is expected to cost $1,500, just so we're aware. With that said, a laptop doesn't necessarily have to cost $1,500. I mean, with inflation, I feel like it probably is close to that. But if you can find an option, let's say for $999 and it doesn't cost you $1,000, you don't have to put it under the capital expenses. It could just go up underneath project expenses. With the capital expenses, so if you do submit anything for that $1,000 or more, part of the backup with this essentially is you have to complete a capital requisition form. So this just includes filling out the serial number essentially and stating that and then signing off essentially that it's being used for the intended purpose. And I believe it's within 5 years, if it's not still being used for it, that it could be returned. Sydney, do you want to confirm on this? Sorry.
Yeah, so with the capital asset, basically like at the end of your project with us, like we would determine just based on like depreciation too, like if you were to be totally honest, it's never happened before with a project where we've had to like take something back because as long as it's continuing to be used in the community to support people who are at imminent risk or experiencing homelessness, then it can just remain in your hands. It's just that additional paperwork. And it's an additional step, like Bryn said. So if we can alleviate, yeah, some extra paperwork for you, like we're always trying to encourage that. But yeah, like I said, hasn't been like an issue that's come up at all with folks because all of you are working and continuing to work in this space, whether you receive Reaching Home funding or not. So yeah, but just wanted to add that in. Thanks, Bryn.
Thank you for confirming that. But yeah, so that's how that works. Obviously, so capital assets are something that are allowed to be purchased. Also, I should just mention if you're doing an operational project, so it just has to be, I believe so it's just not supposed to be like an egregious amount, essentially. So if you are looking on doing like full renovations or you're doing a capital project specifically, then you can't have the operational cost. But if it's just a capital asset and it's just like a singular thing or whatever it is, then it can fall within an operational project. I know it's a little bit confusing. Once again, you can definitely clarify if you have any questions on anything like that. But it is just a little bit different. So I just wanted to explain that as well, because I know I had said earlier that you aren't allowed to use operational funding for a capital project and things like that. So there's just kind of that little piece there. But yeah, if you do have any questions, just let us know. Yeah. So that's that for all of the different categories. The final category is just other funding sources. So this is just kind of where you can input any in-kind or other funding sources that you guys might have. So, for example, an organization might, such as FCSS, is maybe contributing $19,200 in kind to that Reaching Home office space that I had mentioned earlier. So this is what the other $800 a month times 24 months, obviously for the 2-year project, comes out to that $19,200. So you'd be able to put it in there. Another option could be $40,000 from the FCSS and other funding sources for the remainder of the wages for the housing coordinator. So I just wanted to kind of flag both of those things, just so you guys are aware. Like I said, I know budgets can be confusing, so if you guys have questions, by all means, please do let us know, and I will do my best to answer any of them. The other piece I just want to show really quickly. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, no, it is working good. So this is the actual, when you go on our website, if you guys download the template, you're going to get an Excel form. As you can see, it's just an incompleted, obviously, version of what we just went through there. There is this second tab, though, that I just wanted to flag. So it's the examples of eligible activities. So if you click in here, this is just a good reference point, I would say, if you're kind of curious where something goes. So if you're confused based off of the different categories with the staff wages, project costs, capital costs, administration costs, you can just come to the second page and there's a bunch of items that are listed on it. It's not extensive by any means. So if you have questions or you were looking to apply for something else and you're like, it's not on here and you want to know where it would belong, you can definitely reach out to us. It is pretty straightforward. Obviously, wages go in wages. Project costs are most other things that are just affecting your project. Obviously, capital costs, and then admin costs would be administrative costs. So it's not too confusing, but just if you are a little bit unsure of where something belongs, you can definitely do that. A good example of this would be, so for project costs, if there's like a specific meeting space that you guys are using to meet with clients, that would be deemed a project cost. However, if you're looking for just office space where somebody is working and there's no clients that are coming in, that's where we're going to be looking more at that administrative cost. So I would say that's kind of one of the big confusing portions that might come into it that you're not sure where they go. If you do have questions, though, definitely let us know and we are more than happy to help you. But like I said, that second page here hopefully will kind of answer some questions. It also might be a good space just to go and be like, oh, I didn't think about the fact that we would like to also offer this expense essentially or anything like that when it comes to submitting your project. So it's good for that. But yeah, that's pretty much all for the budget though. So if you guys have any questions, by all means, let us know. Sydney, did you want to go over the capital project next, or do you want me to go through the form?
I think let's do capital next, then we can maybe pause for questions and end with the form. What do you think?
Yep, that sounds good. Do you want me to share the capital expense thing, or do you
If
want
you
to share?
don't mind the capital application guide, or application guidelines, that would be amazing. And yeah, just to give, I'm not sure if folks on the call are going to be or interested in submitting a capital project application, but specifically, so for the Indigenous projects, at the time of the application, we aren't asking for a full sustainability plan to be submitted. That will come at a later date. However, with that being said, we want to be transparent about what the requirements are, and we can also give, I'll start off by just giving some quick examples too of, Bryn had already talked about some of the types of projects we funded in the past, but in terms of eligibility, so with Reaching Home, we can support the capital costs associated with developing or renovating emergency shelters, developing or renovating transitional or permanent supportive housing. So that would be specifically housing that provides those wraparound supports for people experiencing or at imminent risk of experiencing homelessness in the community. So for example, if you're a First Nation community, it's a specific type of housing that would maybe there's other departments on the nation, like mental health and addictions and social development that are supporting with providing supports to the residents who are going to be staying there. In terms of other types of capital expenses that are eligible through Reaching Home, we can fund the purchase of a vehicle. We have received and supported many of those requests in the past, especially if the vehicle is going to be providing, transportation for folks to treatment, to other services, if it's being used as outreach, essentially, that would be eligible under Reaching Home. And then lastly, non-residential facilities. So for example, like a community hub, even like a food bank, specifically facilities dedicated to supporting folks who are again experiencing or at imminent risk of experiencing homelessness could be eligible to be funded through Reaching Home. Now, again, because of the minimal funding that we have, typically Reaching Home funding isn't, the only funding. It's often used to leverage with other sources of funding to fund a capital project, just again due to the fact that, yeah, unfortunately, we can only we can only fund up to $100,000, sorry, per year. And with that being said, too, so I do want to just take a moment to go over the sustainability plan requirements. And essentially, there's four kind of key parts to the sustainability plan. The first is funding sources. So what I was just referring to earlier, typically Reaching Home isn't going to be funding your entire project. And so what will be required again at a later date is just a summary of all of the funding sources for your capital project and specifically confirmation that you have secured other funding. Really, Reaching Home capital dollars are dedicated to supporting those really like shovel-ready projects. In terms of the second key pillar for Reaching Home sustainability plan, it's partnerships. So just I think that's certainly one that communities have no problem showing how they might be working with other again departments within the nation or within their settlement. Just showing that community collaboration is going to be there to support the project, even beyond the financial support. It could be in-kind support that these groups are offering as well. And then and I'll just get Bryn to scroll down to. So we had funding to implement the project. And yeah, you can go through this for sure on your end. Again, it's not required to be submitted with your application, but it's just good to be aware of if you are going to be submitting a capital project. Perfect. And then we can maybe stop at project impacts. I'm sorry, I kind of went out of order. I talked about partnerships already, which was third. But project impacts is, whether you view it as a second or third requirement for sustainability plans. So what that is, for example, if you're purchasing a vehicle, are you going to need to hire staff to operate that vehicle? Or are there already internal staff that could be dedicated to operating and providing services via that vehicle? So really it's taking a look at if you are starting or doing a capital project, are there going to be additional operational costs or maintenance costs, associated with that vehicle? Where is that funding going to come from? And we do require letters of support for both partnerships and to show the funding that's going to be providing that operational and maintenance funding that's going to be providing that operational and maintenance costs. So that leads to the last one. So we've gone over funding sources, we've gone over project impacts, we've gone over partnerships. And so lastly, and this is by far in our experience, the most challenging requirement for projects to meet with the sustainability plan. And that's just because it's very difficult to find operational funding for these types of projects. That's what we continue to hear. It's what we continue to share with funders or with all levels of government that we interact with, is operational sustainability. So for Reaching Home, there's a requirement that if funding goes towards capital, you have to showcase that for 5 years after the end date of your Reaching Home agreement with us, that you have funding to cover those operational and maintenance costs associated with whether it's your supportive housing project or with your vehicle. It's only for 5 years. After those 5 years, if you want to sell, whether it's the building or the vehicle or put it towards different uses, depending on what your organization programs look like, that's totally fine. It's just within those 5 years, there are repayment clauses associated. If, for example, we're dealing with this with a project right now. They're looking to sell a year early, and we're trying to support them and help them navigate that process with the federal government so that they don't end up having to pay any funding back. But what's great about them is they're specifically looking at utilizing any funding they get off the sale of the house to invest in more supportive housing. So in that case, there's always situations, and to be honest, it hasn't come up a lot with projects around projects, changing and not meeting the 5-year operational sustainability. But of course, things change, new opportunities present themselves that folks want to look at, and we understand that. But it's just something to be aware of, again, if you're looking at doing this type of project. And usually what we require is a breakdown of, okay, what are the operational maintenance costs going to be for your capital project? So for your housing, for the vehicle, what does that look like? Again, confirmation that funding has been committed, whether it's by the nation um, or in some cases, we've seen some communities be really creative in how they utilize, for example, folks who are going to be living in the housing, who are on income supports, using that income to reinvest back into the housing and back into the program to be able to support the operation and maintenance expenses associated with that housing. So that's a lot of information. There's one other key detail that we like to be transparent about for this type of project. We do require, and this is the federal government's requirements, for any goods or service purchase that's greater than $25,000, we do require 3 bids or 3 quotes, essentially, just and a brief rationale as to why you went with a certain quote. It's just part of it. This is really typical with any kind of federal government requirements, but it's something that we also like to note so that communities are aware of it. I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else. No, I think we've covered everything for the capital projects. And yeah, I thought it was important to go through, even if folks on the call aren't going to be submitting a capital project application, because we are recording this and going to send it out to folks who weren't able to attend today. So happy to answer any questions you have. And sorry, last thing, I know there's always one more thing. The only type really of housing that we're not able to support through Reaching Home specifically is any kind of like affordable or social housing. And that's because the federal government has the CMHC, Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, that deals with that type of housing specifically. And obviously there's lots of changes happening too with the announcement of Build Canada Homes and how that is going to be hopefully increasing capital funding investments into communities, including supportive and affordable housing. And so what we've been told is that Build Canada Homes initiative is really going to complement the work that Reaching Home is doing, but certainly seeing some overlap as well. So curious to see in the next couple of years what Reaching Home after 2028 will look like, and if, yeah, we will be continuing to be able to support these types of capital expenditures. So remains to be seen, but yeah, certainly lots of change and new things happening within the federal government with regards to housing. So yeah, that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions. And maybe, yeah, we could pause here, Bryn, to see if folks have any questions, and then just like, yeah, we'll have a few minutes to wrap up with the Google form at the end. And it's okay if you don't have any questions, but any questions at all? Okay. I know it's information overload, so you might need some time to digest. And of course, if you have any questions after today's session, don't hesitate to reach out to Bryn or myself. And yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Bryn, to go over the form.
Perfect. Thank you, Sydney. Yeah, we'll just about ready to wrap up here, but I'm just gonna go through the Google form really quickly with everybody. I tried to turn up the Zoom, so hopefully everybody can see what's on my screen. But basically, yeah, so like I had mentioned, it's going to request that you log in to a Google account. So after you log in, this is what you will be prompted with. Reaching Home Call for Proposals 2026 to 2028. You know you're in the right place, and this is what the page looks like. There's an option at the very beginning to record your email if you would like to. This isn't a requirement, but you can record it there. And then important. So this is what I was talking about earlier today with the character count. Like I mentioned, I don't necessarily foresee Indigenous applications running into this, but I just want to flag it in case you end up getting any error codes, just so you guys are aware. So there's a 32,000 character limit in Google Form. This is set by Google Form. This isn't set by us or anyone else. It's just like, unfortunately, a very hard, fast requirement with them. So they aren't able to accept any applications that are larger than that. So if you do for some reason have a lot of writing in your application, that is the first thing that I would recommend checking. It is the sum of all of the responses that you put in. So every question all added together is going to give you this total character count. It's not necessarily about one specific question or anything. So if you do get an error code at the end, it's not going to tell you that one question is wrong, because unfortunately it's not just one question that's wrong. It's the sum of all of them being too large. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. We do also obviously have the deadline in here that we'll go through again. So December 8th, 1 p.m., like I mentioned, 1 p.m. So make sure that you guys have everything submitted before that next Monday. We also recommend, like I had mentioned, keeping a copy of your answers in a separate document so it's easier if you do run into any issues. Once again, we have the RH applications email here if you guys do have any questions as well, and then links to all of our guides. So the very first question when you get into the application form, and this is regardless of what type of application you are completing, this is going to be the very first set of questions that everybody has to complete no matter what. To the contact information, we did put just a brief explanation basically of like what signing authority means, what primary contact means, and what secondary contact means. Signing authority is basically we're wanting the information of whoever is ultimately, if you are successful, going to be written on the contract. So whoever the person is at your organization that is legally allowable essentially to sign off on a contract and make it legally binding, that's the person that we're going to want. We aren't necessarily going to reach out to this person with any questions or anything. This is really just strictly for contracts and things. If you are successful, it just saves us a lot of time if we have this information here, so we request it. But like I said, this isn't the person that we're going to be connecting with if they have any questions. As you can see, I have all of these already filled in with just example, but obviously you will put in whatever your answer is for this. So we have the full name of the signing authority, whatever their job title is, and then the email for them, and then the phone number. And then we have the primary contact. So this is the piece that's a bit more important. So this is the person who is creating the application, who is going to be running the program. They're aware of everything with the application. So if we review the application and we have a question, we're just not quite sure about something, this is the person that we are going to connect with to get further information. It's also one of the people that we're going to connect with if we're proceeding with interviews or anything. So we want to make sure that whoever we have listed as the primary contact for their name, job title, email, and phone number, they're somebody that understands and is very familiar with the whole application and what is being requested and applied for. Same thing goes for the secondary contact. So this should also be somebody who is very aware of what's going on in the application. They might have been somebody that helped with the application. They also might be the person who will ultimately be in charge of executing the application, or sorry, not the application, executing the project at the end if they are successful. So we just want to make sure that we have appropriate people in all of those categories there. Like I mentioned, there is the breakdown at the top too, where I just kind of give a brief explanation of what signing authority, primary, and secondary contact people should be, just in case you have any questions or aren't sure. With this said too, I should also mention if you are potentially running like a small not-for-profit or something, and you are the CEO and you're also the primary contact, you can be the signing authority and you can be the primary contact. But if you are wanting to be contacted, you need to make sure you're also in the primary contact. We aren't originally just going to reach out to our signing authorities. So you might have the same information for somebody in twice. We do ask that obviously though for the primary and secondary contacts though, that they are different. Just in case, you know, you're sick, anything happens and we need to reach out to somebody else, we want to make sure that we have at least 2 people on file at the organization that we can chat with if we have questions. Next up, we have just organization information. So pretty standard, you're going to put in your organization's name, you're going to put in your organization's address, complete this for the organization type. For example, Indigenous Nation or organization is what I have selected here for today's Indigenous application session. The year of incorporation that you can complete there. You can copy and paste your mission and vision statement as well into here. And then the final question here at the very start is going to be the application type. So here is where you're going to select, and this is one of the most important questions that you're going to answer in the whole bit, not necessarily for context, but just to make sure that you're filling out the right application. So if you are wanting to fill out an Indigenous application, you want to make sure that you select the very last option here. If you're doing a general application or a current application, you're going to select either of these and it'll take you to the appropriate questions for that. For today's session, obviously, though, we are going to do the Indigenous application. So we select that and then we just hit next at the very bottom. And this is going to take us to the Indigenous application form. And sometimes it does this where it likes to show me the same thing twice, but it's not supposed to. So this is where I talk about technical difficulties. I apologize. Here we go. This is where it will actually take you when you hit next. It's the Indigenous application letter of intent. So we have just a brief explanation and everything at the top there as well. And then there's a section here where you're going to submit your PDF or Word format of your letter of intent. So all you have to do here is just hit upload and then you select your file, you put it in here, and then that's all the work that you have to do for that. And then we're going to ask for a detailed budget. So this is where you can either upload our template, or if you have an internal template that you would rather use, you can upload it into this section as well. After that, we also just do have a section where you have to answer how much money you're requesting for year one, how much money you're requesting for year two, and what the total sum of year one and year two is requesting. So in this example, we have that you're requesting $50,000 in year one, you're requesting $75,000 in year two, and that brings you to a total of $125,000, which is great because it falls under that $200,000 threshold for the 2 years. I understand that this is a little bit of a duplication of process, or just because you also will be telling us in the budget how much it is. It is important though that you fill these numbers in just when we're reviewing the application. It helps to keep things a little bit more simple and prevents us from having to have too many documents all open at once. So that is the purpose for that. Funding advocacy. So based off of previous years, we used to have obviously a completely open call where you were able to ask for as much funding as you want. Because things have changed this year, we still want to know how much funding you guys would ideally have, or would ideally receive, sorry, to address homelessness in your guys' communities. So we have this little section here where you're able to put how much you would actually be requesting if you were able to, and what that funding would go towards. So maybe ideally you're really wanting to build a shelter in your community or do something like that, or you need more staff than just one that you're able to apply for with that $100,000 a year threshold. We just ask that you put all of those numbers in there, kind of give us a brief detail of what it is that you would ideally have. Unfortunately, that's not something that obviously is going to be considered or unfortunately made possible through this cycle of reaching home funding, but we request it just because we take this information and we share it with the government and we share it with other partners, just to let people know essentially what the need really is. We use it to advocate for additional reaching home funding dollars and just other funding in general to go towards houselessness in rural and remote Alberta. So we definitely recommend filling it out. It's not a required answer, so you don't have to fill it in, but we do really appreciate sharing that information. And like I said, we have used information like this before, and we have been able to get more funding for reaching home and other programs. So it's definitely a great section just to address anything that you might want to address in there. And then after we've got that all filled out, we just hit next. And then super simple, it takes you down to the submission agreement. Basically, you're just going to go through, you're going to confirm that your signing authority approves your submission. We're going to confirm that you understand that not all projects are going to be receiving funding. And then you're just going to type your name as a little electronic signature here, so we know that you agree to submitting your application on behalf of your organization. We also have a little note here that just lets you know that if you do have any issues, rhapplications@ruraldevelopment.ca is who you're going to want to reach out to. There is finally an option where you can toggle this on or off if you want to have your responses sent to yourself after you've submitted. Totally up to you if you want to do that or not. But then when you're all done, basically you just hit submit and your form will send over to us and you guys are all good to go. So yeah, that is basically the whole process and how the Google form and everything works. It is pretty straightforward once you get logged in, but like Sydney said, if you have any issues, definitely connect with us and we are more than happy to try to help you if there are any little errors that come along the way. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions though, or anything based off of the Google form that they wanted to ask today, or just questions about your projects or anything in general. If not, I can also pass it over to Sydney if you wanted to wrap things up or discuss anything else.
Yeah, I know we have a few more minutes, so just gonna put it out there last time. But yeah, do folks have any questions? Yeah, Candace, go ahead.
Sorry, had to shut that off. I just have two questions. First of all, being sort of selfish in terms of my day job, the session this afternoon, it's much the same information, except this morning we were focusing on Indigenous-led organizations, right? But you would be going through the form and all of that stuff again, and it would be kind of the same for non-Indigenous organizations, correct?
Yeah, great question. Sorry, Bryn, you go ahead.
Okay, so it will be similar this afternoon, and when I say similar, mostly like going through like the big dates, obviously, when things are due, the maximum funding amounts, and the fact that you're using the Google form and all of those, the very
Yeah.
generic information and the types of projects, for example, that are eligible and all of that, that would remain the same. The piece that is going to be really different between this afternoon and this morning is that we would be going through the actual general application and current project application. So there are obviously some things with that where there aren't all of the same flexibilities and whatnot offered for the current and general projects. So essentially, obviously, if we're planning on applying through the general or current project stream, you wouldn't be submitting a letter of intent. You would have to go through and complete all of the necessary application questions and then submit it that way. You would also need to complete the regular budget template instead of having the flexibility of being able to use an internal one and then later on do that. If you are applying for a capital project, you would also need to submit a sustainability plan with that. So we go a little bit over those other things if that's something that you are looking for. If it was really just kind of the high level understanding, then I would say you're probably fine with today. We will also be recording though this afternoon session. So if it doesn't work for you to apply, but you think you might want to, you think somebody else in your organization might want to review it and just kind of see what's going on, you can always sign up for the afternoon session, and then everyone who is signed up for that session will be receiving a recording of that session as well, just in case you're looking to, you could always skip ahead and just go directly to the Google form section or the application section just to get a little bit more context if that's something that you're interested in. I'm not sure, Sydney, if you want to mention anything else in there.
Well, that's perfect. And that's exactly what I was just going to say to Candace was, yeah, if you can't make this afternoon session and you're curious, definitely sign up and we can send the recording out. But no, I think you covered everything. Did you have another question, Candace?
I did. And I was just going to say that so when we're doing the description of the program, because like, for example, when we say nonprofit or incorporation, right? Because when I read the original, just the documentation on the website, so for those organizations that are not, like, we don't necessarily have charitable status with the CRA, right? But we are still able to apply, because for kind of like smaller or fledgling organizations in rural Alberta, that's often the case, right? Okay, I just wanted to ensure that that was all right. And so our incorporation is really just around like the Societies Act, for example. That's our, okay, all right.
Exactly. And yeah, there is no requirement, yeah, for reaching home that requires any organization to have charitable status. Absolutely. You can just be a society. Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily, maybe just to give an example, because it's come up in the past, there's been some task forces that have reached out. They're not an established society yet. They're a group collaborating. And so what we've told them is if you can find a fiscal agent in your community and still support them and guide them through the Reaching Home project, that would be eligible. But we do require, yeah, the organization to be a registered society, but not a registered.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's good to know. Because I would hate to think that a few of us would be going and doing the entire application and then finding out that actually we would not be eligible. Okay. All right. No, that's helpful. Thank you. Those were my two questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Candace. Any other questions before we wrap up here? Okay. Well, if not, I know Candace and Aileen, you know where to find us if you have any questions. But definitely, yeah, appreciate you folks coming out today. And just so you know, Bryn Teagerly had privately messaged me and just said she had to hop off early to go to another meeting, but she was gonna look for the recording and she wanted to just have a quick call at some point in the next few days. So I gave her our information. But yes, thanks for coming out today. And yeah, we hope this was helpful. We know there's a lot of information that we threw at you. But yeah, as you're completing the application, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, we look forward to hopefully receiving your applications. So thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will talk again later. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.